Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be alone with the dead, when the heavy metal doors seal behind you and the only sound is the mechanical hum of refrigeration units preserving what remains of someone's life? That silence isn't empty, it's deceptive. Behind it lurks something more profound than death itself. Souls lingering because they're not ready to depart. Spirits caught in the liminal space between our world and whatever lies beyond. For over 2 decades, I worked in a morgue. Not as a pathologist or medical examiner, just an orderly, the invisible hand that washes, prepares, and assists, always in the background, in the shadows where questions go unasked. But from those shadows, I witnessed what others missed. Today, I break my silence, not to frighten you, but to warn you about the thin veil that separates us from those who have crossed over, but haven't gone far. The refrigeration hall appears clinical and sterile when you first enter. Stainless steel, bright lights, and the sharp scent of disinfectant. Nothing seems frightening in that ordered environment. The temperature hovers at a precise 38 degrees, cold enough to preserve but not freeze. But stay longer, especially alone during a night shift, and you'll feel the air thicken. The weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting, judging. The temperature remains constant on the thermometer, but certain corners feel impossibly colder, as if something unseen is drawing the warmth away. 15 years ago, they wheeled in a car accident victim, a 36-year-old man whose face was frozen in an expression of pure surprise, as if death had ambushed him mid-thought, mid-sentence, mid-life. The preparation was routine until we tried moving him. 2 of us struggled with the stretcher, the body inexplicably heavier than it should have been. The wheels squeaked against the polished floor as we strained, our breath forming small clouds in the refrigerated air. Later, alone in the hall, the lights flickered and died. In the darkness, I heard it. Soft tapping from inside a chamber. Like knuckles against metal. Like someone trying to get out. 3 distinct knocks, then silence, then 3 more. A pattern too deliberate to be settling metal or expanding pipes. I dismissed it as imagination, as we all do when confronted with the inexplicable. We build rational explanations like shields against the unknown. But similar incidents kept occurring. I began noticing patterns. Souls cling to this world when death comes suddenly or when deep sorrow anchors them. They leave impressions in the air, in scents, in unexplained sounds. They linger in the spaces between heartbeats, in the static between radio stations, in the moments between sleeping and waking when reality feels permeable. An elderly woman who died peacefully left behind the faint scent of her perfume for days. Lily of the valley, sweet and nostalgic. No flowers were present. No perfume bottles. Just the lingering essence of who she was, wafting through the sterile air like a memory made tangible. Then came her whispers, barely audible in an empty room. Not frightening, but profoundly sad. As if she was saying goodbye to a world she wasn't ready to leave. Her voice, like dry leaves rustling across autumn pavement. I would turn, expecting to see someone standing there, but found only empty space and the lingering sensation of words just beyond comprehension. Why share these stories now? Because I can't remain silent any longer. Because understanding the transition between life and death might be the most important knowledge we never discuss. The veil between worlds is thinner than we imagine, more permeable than we're comfortable admitting. If you stay with me until the end, I promise you'll never view death or life the same way again. You'll start noticing the signs around you, the small disturbances in the natural order that suggest we're never truly alone. If you're curious why some souls start wandering the morgue exactly 3 days after death, support this video with a like. Not because it's trendy, but because few dare speak these truths aloud. Share it with friends who need to know, because sometimes death is merely the beginning. The first step into a different kind of existence that overlaps with our own in ways we rarely perceive, but occasionally glimpse in moments of stillness. The dead aren't always angry. Sometimes they're confused, lingering like forgotten guests who miss their departure. They drift through familiar spaces, trying to understand their new state of being. But certain bodies evoke the same reaction in all morgue staff, an instinctive urge to leave the room quickly. Not from fear exactly, but from a bone-deep discomfort. The air turns frigid despite the thermostat. Hands tremble. Equipment malfunctions. Lights stutter and dim, as if something is drawing power from them. These phenomena cluster around victims of violence or sudden death, as if the shock of their passing creates a disturbance that ripples through the physical world. A 22-year-old man arrived one spring morning, killed in a street fight. His face appeared peaceful, but his eyes held a frozen question, as if he couldn't comprehend what had happened. The bruises on his knuckles told of a struggle, but his expression spoke only of confusion. After processing his paperwork, I entered the storage room where his body lay. The lights were off, but something glimmered in the corner. A phone screen, his phone, illuminating by itself despite its battery being dead. His face stared back from the screen, smiling in a photo taken hours before his death. The image flickered, then vanished, leaving me in darkness with the sensation of being watched. That night, security reported footsteps. Heavy, measured, deliberate, in empty corridors. The sound of someone pacing, searching, unable to rest. The cameras captured only a shadow sliding past the glass doors, a darkness deeper than the surrounding night. We never documented these occurrences officially. No reports filed, no memos circulated. It was unspoken knowledge, a code understood by everyone who worked there. Sometimes the physical body departs while something else remains. Something that refuses to acknowledge its changed state. You might attribute such experiences to fatigue or an overactive imagination. The rational mind seeks explanations that fit within its understanding of reality. But how do you explain multiple staff members, on different shifts, reporting identical phenomena? A new employee, young, cocky, skeptical, took an evening shift alone. Within an hour, he returned from the refrigeration hall, his face drained of color, hands shaking as he lit a cigarette. He claimed someone had whispered his name repeatedly, the sound coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. We investigated. The voice had come from the chamber containing a 40-year-old stroke victim. Another death marked by that bewildered expression of someone yanked unexpectedly from life. Someone who hadn't finished what they started. A morgue should be devoid of extraneous scents. Everything is sterilized, controlled, clinical. The dominant smells are disinfectant, formaldehyde, and the faint metallic tang of refrigeration units. Yet, sometimes tobacco smoke drifts through empty rooms. Coffee, perfume, jam, the scent of freshly baked bread or newly mown grass. These aren't random smells, but specific sensory memories imprinted by the departed, olfactory echoes of lives suddenly interrupted. One chamber emanated the scent of lily of the valley for hours, the signature fragrance of its occupant. A scent so distinct and localized it seemed to form a boundary around her body. Coincidence? Perhaps. But feel how the air vibrates in those moments, how it thickens and pulses with something just beyond perception, and coincidence seems an inadequate explanation. One night alone in the facility, I experienced something that defies rational explanation. Walking past a chamber, the lights abruptly failed. Not flickered, failed completely, plunging the corridor into absolute darkness. When they flickered back on seconds later, a handprint marked the glass from inside. Fingers splayed, palm pressed flat, as if someone had been trying to reach through. It vanished when I blinked, but I know what I saw. The impression remained in my mind, 5 fingers in a palm, smaller than mine, pressed against the barrier between worlds. Can we help these lingering souls, or are they condemned to wander in darkness among the smells of formaldehyde and echoes of strangers' footsteps? This question haunted me until I met Valerie Nelson, an elderly woman with gentle eyes who came not to claim a body, but to release a soul. She arrived minutes before closing. Her behavior immediately unusual. No tears, no visible grief. She simply stood motionless, gazing upward as if tracking something invisible, her head tilted slightly as if listening to words only she could hear. Then she said, "He hasn't left. I feel him. He's waiting for forgiveness." Her voice was steady, certain, as if stating an obvious fact rather than something beyond normal perception. Her husband had collapsed from a heart attack on their doorstep. The night his body arrived, our electrical system malfunctioned, circuit breakers tripping, a refrigeration unit burning out, a chamber door repeatedly jamming despite repairs. Equipment in that section failed continuously for days afterward. Lights would burn too brightly, then dim to near darkness. Computers crashed, losing data. Thermometers showed impossible readings. The air felt charged, like the moments before a thunderstorm. Valerie asked to see him, not briefly, but for a proper farewell. Breaking protocol, I allowed it, driven by an inexplicable certainty that this was necessary. She approached his body, stroked his cheek with tender familiarity, and whispered, "I forgive you. I release you." Simple words, but spoken with such profound emotion that the air itself seemed to vibrate in response. Then she turned to me with startling clarity. "You'll be able to work peacefully here now." Not a question or hope, a statement of fact. By morning, all malfunctions had ceased as if they'd never occurred. Systems functioned normally. The oppressive atmosphere had lifted, replaced by the usual clinical calm. This became my turning point. Souls linger with purpose, waiting for forgiveness, acknowledgement, closure. Without these, they remain tethered to our world, unable to complete their transition. The loneliest bodies, those receiving no visitors, claimed by no one, generate the strangest phenomena, as if the soul rebels not just against death, but against being forgotten. Emptiness becomes the heaviest anchor, invisibility the cruelest punishment. That unseen presence you sometimes feel in an empty room, perhaps it's someone waiting to be remembered, someone desperate for acknowledgement that they existed at all. I began documenting patterns, recurring scents, unexplained sounds, shadows moving against light sources, temperature fluctuations in specific areas, equipment failures near certain bodies. These manifestations intensified during traditional remembrance periods, as if the membrane between worlds thins, allowing brief returns. The veil becomes gauze-like, permeable during these times of collective memory. An elderly man died of pneumonia, nameless, unclaimed, destined for anonymous cremation. His body bore the marks of a hard life, old scars, poorly healed fractures, the yellowed fingers of a lifetime smoker. The night before his disposal, a folder of documents inexplicably fell from my desk. Not slid, fell, as if pushed. As I gathered the scattered papers, I found a torn scrap with shaky handwriting. "I'm here." 3 letters, 2 words, a desperate assertion of existence. It couldn't have been there previously. His body would vanish forever by morning, but he'd left his mark, his final communication. After that, I changed my approach to the nameless dead. I began acknowledging them, greeting them, calling them friend, speaking a few words of comfort. "You're not alone. You're seen. You matter. Simple phrases that cost nothing but seemed to change everything. The atmosphere in the hall transformed. Fewer electrical disturbances, fewer cold spots, fewer unexplained sounds. As if being recognized was all they needed, all they had ever needed. But some cases defy such simple resolution. One autumn, we received a man in his 50s. Lived hard, died alone from an overdose. His body told its own story. Track marks, liver damage, the premature aging of chronic substance abuse. The doctor called it routine, another statistic. I knew immediately it wasn't. From the first night, his chamber refused to stay closed. The latch would click, the seal would set, but by morning the door stood ajar. Not wide open, just slightly parted, as if someone had peered out and forgotten to close it fully. The light fixture above his compartment burned out twice in succession while others remained functional. At night came the coughing, a harsh, phlegmy sound from an empty room, the sound of lungs struggling to clear themselves. My colleague dismissed my concerns until he saw a silhouette reflected in the glass, a man in an apron standing behind him, watching over his shoulder. When he turned, no one was there. The space was empty, but the feeling of presence remained. For the first time in years, he requested reassignment to day shifts only. His hands shook as he filled out the form. The following weekend, reviewing security footage, I witnessed something impossible. The camera monitoring the storage corridor captured movement. A tall figure with slumped shoulders moving with exhausted determination. The image wasn't clear, more suggestion than definition, but unmistakably human in form and movement. The face appeared blurred, as if the camera itself refused to record it clearly, as if the technology couldn't quite translate what existed between states of being. After cremation, I thought it was over. The physical anchor gone, the spirit would surely move on. Exactly 1 week later, the same cough echoed through the hall. The same light malfunctioned. The same cold spot formed by an empty compartment. That's when I realized cremation doesn't necessarily release a soul. Physical destruction doesn't equate to spiritual transition. Some return not for their physical remains, but for the attention they were denied in life, for the recognition they never received. If you've stayed with me this far, you understand the weight of what I'm sharing. Hit subscribe now so you don't miss my next confession about the 3 signs that indicate when a soul is ready to move on, knowledge few are willing to share, insights that might help you understand the strange occurrences in your own life, the unexplained moments that logic can't quite resolve. Since that realization, I've avoided being alone during certain cases. No policy forbids it. It's pure self-preservation. A building can be sanitized, but the air remembers. Walls absorb energy. Floors retain impressions. Souls who departed unwillingly weave themselves into the fabric of a place, creating patterns that repeat like echoes bouncing between canyon walls. Those who die in emotional pain, not just physical agony, leave the strongest impressions. People who lived isolated, carrying guilt or regret. Their energy lingers in personal effects, in clothing, in the final expression frozen on their faces. Without proper farewell, these emotions become anchors, tethering them to the physical world long after their bodies have ceased functioning. I once witnessed a man visiting his brother's body. He stood silently weeping, tears streaming unchecked down his face. No sobbing, no visible grief, just silent tears falling like rain. After a minute, he whispered, "Forgive me." I understand now. Simple words, but filled with years of unspoken history. That night, for the first time in weeks, the building felt peaceful. No unexplained drafts, no shadows in peripheral vision, no equipment failures. As if the soul had received what it needed. Understanding. As if those words had unlocked a door allowing passage to whatever comes next. The nameless dead leave a distinctive imprint, not frightening, but profoundly empty, a vacuum that seems to pull at the edges of reality. One winter evening, they brought in an elderly man found in an abandoned building basement. No identification, no personal effects except a tattered scarf with faded embroidery, 2 intertwined initials and a date, May 1958. His face appeared almost translucent, as if he'd begun fading before death claimed him, as if he'd been disappearing incrementally for years. Following his arrival, subtle distortions permeated the building. Clocks malfunctioned, running fast then slow, always deviating by exactly 19 minutes. Not 20, not 18, but precisely 19. Digital displays and analog hands alike. Staff reported spatial disorientation, walking down familiar corridors only to find themselves in unexpected locations. I exited the elevator on the ground floor but emerged in the basement. Impossible, yet it happened. The button I pressed was still illuminated, but the doors opened to the wrong floor, as if the building's architecture had temporarily rearranged itself. Even our security guard, a former military man impervious to suggestion, someone who prided himself on rationality, admitted feeling watched. "Something's wrong here," he said before leaving early, keys jangling nervously in his hand. "Feels like we're not alone." In the empty building I heard it, a voice whispering through walls. Not threatening, simply calling. A sound like paper rustling, like someone turning pages, searching for something. I followed it to the chamber containing that nameless man. His face had changed subtly, relaxed, as if he'd been waiting for someone to notice him as a person rather than a case number. I held his scarf and whispered, "You're not alone." In that moment, the overhead light stabilized, and the wall clock displayed the correct time for the first time in days. The air felt lighter, clearer, as if a pressure had been released. After his cremation, normalcy returned to the building. No footsteps, no time slips, no disorientation. Just the lingering sense that someone had finally found peace. These experiences taught me that perhaps no death is truly final. Even a nameless body contains a person desperate for acknowledgement, a consciousness that persists beyond biological function. Sometimes a soul returns not seeking attention, but bringing warning. That's when you hear them, slow, heavy footsteps in empty corridors. Not the sharp click of dress shoes or squeak of rubber soles, but dull, weighted steps carrying an invisible burden. Your heart synchronizes with their rhythm, recognizing something primal, something that speaks to the deepest part of your brain that remembers predators in the night. I first heard such footsteps at 4 a.m., that liminal hour when the world seems suspended between states, when the boundary between living and dead thins to transparency. Standing in the preparation room, I heard distinct footfalls approaching, measured, deliberate, purposeful. Not rushing, but moving with clear intent. I knew the building was empty. The corridor revealed nothing. Yet the steps continued, now receding toward the personal effects storage room, where we kept belongings that arrived with the bodies. Inside, a black purse lay on a shelf. A note beside it reading, "Check inside." Not in my handwriting, not in any staff member's hand. Within the purse was a folded paper bearing an address and the message, "Tell them I didn't leave voluntarily." The handwriting was feminine, precise, each letter carefully formed. The purse belonged to a 29-year-old woman found dead in her apartment. Heart failure, according to official records. But something felt wrong, discordant, like a piano key struck in the wrong octave. The message was impossible. Her body had been cremated days earlier, yet it existed. Even beyond death, she was trying to communicate something vital. The footsteps were her method, her soul's desperate attempt to be heard. Not for herself, but for someone who needed to know the truth about her passing. Some souls linger not for their own peace, but for others, carrying messages that refuse to be silenced. I encountered a soul who didn't merely walk, but demanded justice. Max, a new hire in his 30s, approached the job with inappropriate levity. Tall, confident, with a laugh that echoed too loudly in solemn spaces. "I don't believe in any of this mysticism," he'd boast while making jokes during preparations. We warned him, "Don't mock the dead, it's not respectful." He laughed it off. "If spirits exist, let them come haunt me. I could use the company during night shift." His voice bounced off metal surfaces, too loud, too careless. Everything changed when they brought in an older man who died alone. Cardiac arrest, discovered only after neighbors complained about the smell. His apartment contained bizarre drawings and symbols covering the walls. Spirals, circles, lines forming patterns that seemed almost mathematical in their precision. Among his possessions was a child's photograph, yellowed with age. No family came forward. No one claimed him. Another anonymous end. Max was working when the body arrived. True to form, he joked while placing the photo on the dead man's chest. "Show us what you've got, old man. Give us a sign." His voice echoed in the empty room, challenging, dismissive. He stepped out for a cigarette, leaving the body unattended. Upon returning, he found the photo on the floor, its edge blackened as if burned. On the examination table was a distinct wet handprint, small, childlike, that belonged to no one present. Water beaded on the metal surface, though nothing had been spilled. Max tried rationalizing it as a prank. "Very funny," he called out, assuming a colleague was responsible. "You can come out now." No one answered. The next day, staff found him unconscious in the corridor outside that chamber. Not injured, not ill, simply unconscious, as if something had drained his energy completely. Scratched into the wall beside him was a single word: return. What needed returning remained unclear, but Max quit immediately, not even collecting his final paycheck. No one joked about the dead after that. This isn't superstition or campfire tales. It's reality demanding respect. The longer you work among the dead, the more you understand. Death requires reverence. Not religious ritual, but simple human acknowledgement. The dead, escorted with dignity and compassion, depart peacefully. Those who die carrying betrayal or resentment leave their emotions embedded in the physical space. Walls, floors, air molecules. Their presence manifests as unease, the sensation of being watched, the feeling of breath on your neck when you're alone in a room. I encountered one such case when a mother who'd lost 3 children arrived. I've never felt a body so heavy, not physically but in unseen weight, as if all the world's pain was compressed within her. A 50-year-old teacher whose death certificate listed an unusual cause: heart rupture. Not metaphorical, but literal. The medical examiner explained, "Sometimes the organ doesn't fail gradually. The person simply dies from emotional pain, from the impossibility of continuing." Her heart had physically torn, unable to contain her grief. The atmosphere around her was suffocating, a cold, wet pressure impossible to escape. Like standing in ocean depths, water pressing from all sides. Later, I learned she'd lost 3 children over 11 years. 1 in a car accident, 1 to illness, 1 in a fire. Neighbors avoided her, whispering she was cursed. She lived her final years in isolation. No visitors, no calls, no letters. Her diary's last entry read simply, "I no longer feel time, only its echo." 7 words that contained universes of suffering. Her presence transformed the morgue. Light behaved differently in her vicinity, even with overhead fluorescents blazing. Shadows pooled unnaturally thick in corners. Darkness seemed to gather around her, as if light itself couldn't penetrate the density of her pain. Once, passing her chamber, I heard children laughing. Not fearful, but desperate, tinged with madness. A sound that shouldn't exist in that place, at that hour. During night rounds, I found her compartment door slightly open. Approaching, I was overwhelmed by the scent of frankincense, rich, resinous, sacred. We never use frankincense, that's strictly for church rituals. Our world is alcohol, formaldehyde, disinfectant. Clinical smells, sterile and sharp. Yet this was unmistakable, familiar to anyone who's attended a funeral service. The ancient scent of passage, of transition between states. More disturbing still, the wall clock showed exactly 4 a.m., precisely when her youngest child had died, according to police reports. Not 3:59, not 4:01, exactly 4:00, as if time itself had paused in recognition. Staff began falling ill that week, unexplained respiratory issues, eye inflammations, physical manifestations of an emotional miasma. A veteran security guard refused to enter that section, saying, "I'm not afraid of death, but she's here now. Not in the body, in the air itself. She breathes it." Eventually, a niece was located to claim the remains. The young woman signed paperwork hurriedly and left without ceremony, without acknowledgement. We discovered afterward that a small pendant remained in the chamber, containing photos of 3 young boys, smiling in happier times. When I retrieved it, the metal felt warm, not from body heat but from something else entirely. Warm as if recently held, recently touched. I slipped it into the coat pocket with her personal effects. The following day, all phenomena ceased. No footsteps, no electrical disturbances, no shadows moving independently, as if someone had finally found peace or completed unfinished business. That's when I understood a fundamental truth. Souls don't linger without purpose. Each has a story, a mission, a need, but the most frightening cases involve those who died suddenly, without comprehension or acceptance. Their arrival brings not subtle signs but chaotic energy, a storm of manifestation. One rainy afternoon, they brought in a 26-year-old man who had fallen from a 7th-floor window. Water still beaded on his skin from the downpour, his clothes sodden. His family insisted he would never take his own life. He was building a future, had plans, ambitions. Yet the window was open, with no signs of struggle, as if he'd simply stepped into emptiness. Seeing him on the stretcher, I felt immediate unease, a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with exertion. He appeared peaceful, as if sleeping. His face relaxed, fingers slightly curled as if still holding something invisible. But the stillness felt wrong. Not like a body, but like a vessel still containing something vital, something that refused to acknowledge its changed state. After placing him in a chamber and completing protocols, I detected a sharp, earthy scent, unlike anything belonging in a sterile environment. Like freshly turned soil, like a forest after rainfall. 30 minutes later, checking his compartment, I found the door ajar, as if someone had partially exited. After securing it again, I heard a sharp click from inside, followed by words that froze my blood. "But I'm alive." Not a whisper, not a shout. A simple statement of perceived fact. The voice was faint but distinct, not imagined, not misheard. A voice that shouldn't exist in that place, at that moment. That night, lights throughout the facility flickered erratically, despite the electrical system functioning normally. Cold drafts swept the floors, despite sealed windows and doors. The security monitor captured something impossible. A male silhouette standing beside its own body, bent forward, examining itself with evident confusion. Not threatening, not malevolent, simply bewildered, unable to reconcile what it was seeing with what it believed to be true. When his family came for identification, his mother collapsed. His brother, after long silence, approached me privately. He was terrified of heights his entire life. He wouldn't even step onto a balcony, whatever the official report says he couldn't have jumped. That's what prevented his departure. His soul couldn't comprehend what had happened. It searched desperately for explanation, finding none, remaining tethered to its former vessel. I began praying silently, not as religious ritual but as human connection, asking him to find understanding, to accept his transition. Gradually, the atmosphere lightened, the oppressive weight lifted, lights stabilized, the chamber remained closed. It reinforced my most profound realization. The worst death isn't painful death, but death without understanding, when someone departs so suddenly they cannot accept their new reality. Death isn't our final chapter. It's merely a transition to something we don't yet comprehend. The dead remain connected to us through memory, through spaces they inhabited, through the very air we breathe. If this video has touched you, share it with someone who's lost a loved one. Perhaps knowing that souls linger might bring comfort, or at least understanding. And if you want to learn about the 3 signs that indicate when a soul is finally ready to move on, subscribe now. Because some truths are too important to remain hidden in shadows.